Discovering the Deeper Aspects of the Tao. A complete chapter-by-chapter exploration by Ryan Franklin. The Tao Te Ching teaches that the way which can be fixed into a single path is not the eternal way. Use no way as way. We took that teaching seriously. Rather than presenting one interpretation and calling it correct, we examine every chapter through 4 classical lenses: philosophy, cultivation, Zen, and martial arts, because Laozi himself warned us against clinging to one perspective. Each lens reveals truths the others cannot see. Together, they uncover possibilities that no single reading ever could. This is the Tao Te Ching. Read the way it asks to be read, with an open mind, from every angle, holding nothing fixed. Wang Bi, the brilliant young philosopher of the 3rd century, reads each verse as revealing the deep structure of reality. The relationship between being and non-being, form and emptiness. Heshang Gong, the hermit by the river, reads the same words as a manual for inner cultivation. Breath, energy, meditation, and the transformation of the self. Chan Buddhism was born from the meeting of Indian meditation and Taoist insight. Its founders studied the Tao Te Ching deeply, and recognized in it the same truths they had discovered through sitting. Chan strips away commentary to ask, what is this verse pointing to, right now, before you think about it? The internal martial arts, Tai Chi, Bagua, Xingyi, are the Tao Te Ching made physical. They were created by Taoist practitioners who took Laozi's words literally: the soft overcomes the hard, the yielding overcomes the forceful. Every verse is read through the body. Neither Chan nor martial arts is foreign to this text. They are what happens when different traditions take the Tao seriously and follow where it leads. The highest virtue is not virtuous. Therefore it has virtue. The lower virtue never loses its virtue. Therefore it has no virtue. The highest virtue acts without acting, and has no motive. The lower virtue acts with purpose. The highest benevolence acts without motive. The highest righteousness acts with motive. The highest propriety acts, and when no one responds, rolls up its sleeves and forces compliance. Thus, when the Tao is lost, virtue appears. When virtue is lost, benevolence appears. When benevolence is lost, righteousness appears. When righteousness is lost, propriety appears. Propriety is the thin veneer of loyalty and trust, and the beginning of disorder. For knowledge is the flower of the Tao, and the beginning of folly. Therefore the great person dwells in the thick, not the thin, in the fruit, not the flower. Hence, rejects that and accepts this. Highest virtue, virtue that does not know itself as virtue. Lower virtue, virtue that maintains itself consciously. Ren. Benevolence, what appears when natural virtue is lost. Yi. Righteousness, what appears when benevolence is lost. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Practice occurs as naturally as breathing. No one congratulates himself on breathing correctly. When the Tao is lost, virtue appears. Heshang Gong applies this to the trajectory of practice. When direct connection to source is lost, the practitioner compensates with virtuous behavior: more sitting, more effort, more discipline. This compensation can be useful, but it is not the same as original connection. For knowledge is the flower of the Tao. The practitioner who develops abilities to perceive what others cannot perceive has cultivated a flower that will fall. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. When direct realization fades, rules multiply. When transmission weakens, rituals elaborate. When the living teaching dies, the dead scripture remains. The beginning of disorder, the monastery consumed by regulations, has lost what regulations were meant to protect. The great person dwells in the thick. The Chan practitioner focuses on the essential question: who am I? What is this? And does not get lost in the elaborations of Buddhist philosophy, the hierarchies of attainment, the competitions of monasteries. Root, not branches. Internal martial arts. When righteousness is lost, propriety appears. When the living art degrades, forms multiply. Schools compete to preserve the authentic transmission while adding requirements, rituals, and regulations that the original masters would not recognize. Foreknowledge is the flower of the Tao, and the beginning of folly. The martial artist who relies on predicting the opponent's next move has lost contact with direct perception. The master responds to what is happening, not to what he calculates will happen. Wang Bi, philosophical. The definitive statement on the relationship between the Tao and conventional morality. The highest virtue is not virtuous. Wang Bi would emphasize that this is not criticism of virtue but clarification of its nature. True virtue flows from the Tao without self-consciousness. The moment virtue becomes conscious of itself, it has already begun to decline. The progression from virtue to benevolence to righteousness to propriety describes not historical stages but logical degradation. Each stage requires more conscious effort and produces less authentic result. In ancient times, those who attained the One. Heaven attained the One and became clear. Earth attained the One and became stable. Spirits attained the One and became numinous. Valleys attained the One and became full. All creatures attained the One and came to life. Lords and kings attained the One and became the standard for all under heaven. What brought this about? Without clarity, heaven would crack. Without stability, earth would quake. Without numinosity, spirits would fade. Without fullness, valleys would dry up. Without life, creatures would perish. Without standards, lords and kings would fall. Therefore, the noble is rooted in the humble. The high is founded on the low. Thus lords and kings call themselves orphan, alone, unworthy. Is this not taking the humble as root? Therefore, the highest praise is no praise. Do not wish to be precious as jade, but common as stone. Yi. The one undivided source, what all things attain to exist. Jing. Clear, pure, what heaven attains from the One. Ning. Stable, peaceful, what earth attains from the One. Ling. Numinous, spiritual, what spirits attain from the One. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. Those who attained the One, all beings already possess Buddha nature. The question is whether they recognize it. Heaven's clarity, earth's stability, spirit's numinosity, these are not additions but revelations of what was always present. Without clarity, heaven would crack. Chan might read this as describing what happens when Buddha nature is forgotten. The mind that loses contact with its nature becomes fragmented. The life that separates from source becomes chaotic. The noble is rooted in the humble. Enlightenment is not found in special states but in ordinary mind. Internal martial arts. The noble is rooted in the humble. Advanced techniques depend on basic structure. The master who can throw an opponent with a touch has spent decades refining the most fundamental alignments. Lords and kings call themselves orphan. The skilled practitioner does not claim mastery but acknowledges dependence on teachers, lineage, training partners, the tradition itself. Common as stone, the highest skill appears unremarkable. The master stands normally, moves normally, appears to do nothing special. Only in contact does the opponent discover what that ordinariness contains. Wang Bi, philosophical. Cosmology with political implications. Those who attained the One, this is not historical narrative but logical description. Heaven, earth, spirits, valleys, creatures, rulers all exist through participation in the One. Wang Bi would emphasize that the One is not something added to things from outside but the fundamental nature of things themselves, obscured by differentiation but never absent. The noble is rooted in the humble. Wang Bi interprets this as both cosmic truth and political wisdom. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Heshang Gong reads attaining the One as describing the goal of cultivation itself. Heaven attained the One and became clear in the body. The mind attains the One through clarity, freedom from disturbance. Earth attained the One and became stable, the body attains the One through rootedness, stability in standing and sitting. Spirits attained the One and became numinous, the spirit that resides in the heart attains the One through unity of intention and attention. Returning is the movement of the Tao. Weakness is the function of the Tao. All things under heaven are born of being. Being is born of non-being. Fan. Return, reverse, the Tao's essential movement. Dong. Movement, motion, what returning describes. Ru. Weak, soft, yielding, the Tao's method of functioning. Yung. Function, use, what weakness describes. Internal martial arts. Weakness is the function, this is the fundamental principle of internal arts. Strength against strength creates stalemate or mutual destruction. Weakness against strength allows the strength to overextend, to commit, to lose balance. The soft hand that yields to pressure feels the direction of force and redirects it. The hard hand that resists pressure cannot feel and cannot redirect. Being is born of non-being in practice. Movement arises from stillness. The master who is perfectly still in the moment before action produces action that seems to come from nowhere. Wang Bi, philosophical. Everything that differentiates returns to unity, everything that manifests returns to source, everything that moves eventually rests. Understanding this movement, the sage aligns with it rather than fighting it. Weakness is the function of the Tao. Wang Bi interprets this as explaining why Wu Wei succeeds where force fails. The Tao accomplishes everything precisely because it does not force anything. Weakness here is not incapacity but method. The weak approach works because it aligns with the Tao's own way of working. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Describing the essence of internal practice. Returning is the movement, cultivation is not advancement toward something new but return to what was always present. The practitioner returns to natural breathing, returns to original posture, returns to mind before thought complicated it. Every instruction in cultivation points toward return to the center, return to stillness, return to the simplicity of the uncarved block. Weakness is the function in practice. This means that force accomplishes nothing and softness accomplishes everything. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. Chan finds in this verse the heart of its own teaching. Returning is the movement of the Tao. Enlightenment is not going somewhere new but returning to what was always here. When the superior person hears the Tao, they practice it diligently. When the middling person hears the Tao, they half believe, half doubt. When the inferior person hears the Tao, they laugh out loud. If they did not laugh, it would not be the Tao. Thus the ancient sayings have it. The bright Tao seems dim. The advancing Tao seems to retreat. The level Tao seems rough. The highest virtue seems like a valley. Great whiteness seems soiled. Vast virtue seems insufficient. Established virtue seems uncertain. Solid truth seems to waver. The great square has no corners. The great vessel takes long to complete. The great sound is barely heard. The great image has no form. The Tao is hidden, without name. Yet only the Tao lends aid and brings to completion. Superior person responds to the Tao with diligent practice. Middling person wavers between belief and doubt. Inferior person laughs at what seems absurd. Shayo. Laugh, the necessary response to genuine paradox. Wang Bi, philosophical. The Tao cannot be approached through conventional thinking. It must seem absurd to those who have not yet glimpsed beyond appearances. The sage ruler who embodies the Tao will similarly appear incomprehensible to those who measure by ordinary standards. The bright Tao seems dim. Wang Bi interprets this as explaining why the sage often appears foolish. The sage's wisdom operates at a level that conventional intelligence cannot perceive. What seems like failure is actually success. What seems like retreat is actually advance. Heshang Gong, cultivation. The middling practitioner understands intellectually but practices inconsistently, sometimes remembering the teaching and sometimes forgetting. The inferior practitioner finds the whole enterprise ridiculous and dismisses it entirely. The great image has no form. Heshang Gong applies this to meditation itself. The practitioner who seeks specific experiences, visions, sensations, states, has not yet understood. True practice has no particular form, it cannot be captured in any description. The great vessel is late in completion. This describes the timeline of authentic cultivation. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. The laughter is appropriate. What is being pointed to cannot be grasped by the mind that laughs. The great sound is barely heard. Chan might call this the wordless transmission. The teaching that changes everything makes no sound because it is not transmitted through words. The Tao is hidden, without name. Buddha nature cannot be named or grasped. The moment you think you have it, you have lost it. Yet only the Tao lends aid and brings to completion. This is the compassion that underlies the apparent absurdity. What seems like obstruction is actually the only possible gift. Internal martial arts. The great vessel is late in completion. Mastery cannot be rushed. The student who seeks quick results may acquire impressive-looking technique but misses the foundation that makes technique effective. The master who has practiced for decades appears to do nothing special yet contains what decades produce. The great square has no corners. The highest martial skill has no fixed form. The master who has internalized principles no longer needs techniques. Response arises spontaneously from the situation itself. The Tao gives birth to one. One gives birth to two. Two gives birth to three. Three gives birth to the 10,000 things. The 10,000 things carry yin on their backs and embrace yang in their arms, blending these breaths into harmony. What people detest: being orphaned, alone, unworthy. Yet kings and lords call themselves by these names. Thus things may decrease and thereby increase, or increase and thereby decrease. What others have taught, I also teach. The violent do not die natural deaths. I shall take this as the father of my teaching. Tao. The Tao, source of all existence. Yi. 1. The first differentiation, primal unity. Ah. 2. Yin and yang, fundamental polarity. San. 3. Dynamic interaction producing creation. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Blending these breaths into harmony, Heshang Gong applies this directly to practice. The cultivator harmonizes yin and yang within the body through breathing, through posture, through mental cultivation. The goal is not to eliminate one or enhance the other but to allow them to blend, to circulate, to transform into each other naturally. The violent do not die natural deaths in cultivation. This means that force destroys what it attempts to create. The practitioner who forces breath, forces energy, forces states, this practitioner harms rather than helps the process. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. Nothing exists independently. Everything is interconnected in a web of arising and passing away. The 10,000 things carry yin and embrace yang. Chan might read this as the non-duality at the heart of apparent duality. Yin and yang are not truly separate. They are two aspects of one reality, distinguishable but not divisible. Things may decrease and thereby increase. This is the teaching of emptiness. What is full of self is actually empty. What is empty of self is actually full. Internal martial arts. The Tao gives birth to one in combat. This is the unity of intention and action. The moment before movement separates into technique. One gives birth to two. This is the polarity of yin and yang that allows all martial movement, advance and retreat, expansion and contraction, substantial and insubstantial. 2 gives birth to 3. This is the dynamic interplay that produces actual technique, the third element that emerges from the interaction of the two. Blending these breaths into harmony, this is the goal of mature practice in any tradition. Wang Bi, philosophical. The fundamental statement of Taoist cosmology. The Tao gives birth to one. Wang Bi would emphasize that this is not temporal sequence but logical priority. The Tao does not first exist and then produce the one. Rather, the one is the Tao in its first manifestation, the first distinction within undifferentiated source. The progression to 2, 3, and the 10,000 things follows the same logic. Each stage emerges from the previous not through passage of time but through increasing differentiation. The softest thing in the world overcomes the hardest thing in the world. That which has no substance enters where there is no space. By this I know the benefit of non-action. Teaching without words. The benefit of non-action. Few in the world can attain this. Utmost softness, the Tao's characteristic quality. Utmost hardness, what softness overcomes. Gallop through, how softness overcomes hardness. Non-existence, what has no substance. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. The hardness that blocks ordinary perception is the hardness of conceptual fixation. The softness that penetrates is the emptiness of awareness itself. That which has no substance enters where there is no space. This describes enlightenment. What is realized is nothing, no thing, no substance, no particular content. Yet this nothing penetrates everything, transforms everything, is closer to reality than any something. Teaching without words, the Chan transmission from master to student happens beyond language. Words may be used, but what is transmitted cannot be contained in words. Internal martial arts. Most cannot sustain this trust when facing actual force. Consider the grappler facing a locked, rigid defense, arms braced, muscles clenched, every joint fortified against entry. The hard response is to match force with force, to pry and wrench and exhaust oneself against the barricade. The soft response is to become water, flow around the barrier, let weight settle where structure is absent, find the angle where resistance has no purchase. The arm that cannot be moved directly yields to the hand that slides beneath it without pressure. Wang Bi, philosophical. The Tao accomplishes everything precisely because it does not force anything. That which has no substance enters where there is no space. Wang Bi interprets this as describing Wu, non-being, the non-being that underlies all being. Because the Tao has no particular form, it can take any form. Because it insists on nothing, everything follows it. This is the political wisdom that pervades the Tao Te Ching. Govern by not governing, lead by not leading, accomplish by not striving. Few in the world can attain this. The difficulty is not intellectual but practical. Heshang Gong, cultivation. The softest thing overcomes the hardest in the body. This means that soft tissue, properly cultivated, can transmit more power than tense muscle. The breath that is gentle penetrates deeper than the breath that is forced. The mind that is soft perceives what the rigid mind misses. That which has no substance enters where there is no space. Heshang Gong applies this to qi circulation. The energy that the practitioner cultivates has no material substance, yet it penetrates everywhere in the body, entering the finest meridians, reaching places that physical manipulation cannot touch. Fame or self, which is more dear? Self or wealth, which is worth more? Gain or loss, which brings more pain? Therefore, excessive love leads to great expense. Hoarding much ensures heavy loss. Know contentment and avoid disgrace. Know when to stop and avoid danger. Thus one may endure. Ming. Fame, name, reputation, what is less dear than self? Shin. Self, body, person, what is more dear than fame? Huo. Goods, wealth, possessions, what is less valuable than self? Ari. Love, attachment, what leads to great expense when excessive? Internal martial arts. Knowing when to stop is as important as knowing how to begin. The martial artist who chases trophies pays a price the trophy never acknowledges. Competition-focused training accumulates injuries the way hoarding accumulates possessions, each one seeming manageable alone, catastrophic in some. The torn ligament that was pushed through, the concussion that was shrugged off, the chronic pain that became background noise, these are the great expenses of excessive love for recognition. Wang Bi, philosophical. Know contentment and avoid disgrace. Wang Bi interprets this as the foundation of good governance. The ruler who knows when enough is enough does not overreach, does not provoke opposition, does not create the conditions for his own downfall. Know when to stop and avoid danger. The effective ruler recognizes limits. Attempting to control everything produces the chaos that control was supposed to prevent. Recognizing natural limits and working within them produces lasting stability. Heshang Gong, cultivation. The desire for fame as a cultivator creates the same suffering as any other fame-seeking. The object differs but the attachment is identical. Excessive love leads to great expense. Heshang Gong applies this to attachment within practice. The practitioner who loves particular states, bliss, visions, energy experiences, expends enormous effort trying to reproduce and maintain them. This effort exhausts what practice should cultivate. Know contentment and avoid disgrace. The practitioner who is content with ordinary mind, ordinary body, ordinary breath, has nothing to lose and nothing to prove. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. Fame or self, which is more dear? Chan might respond, neither. Both fame and the self that seeks fame are constructions that obscure original nature. The question is designed to lead beyond the question, to the recognition that what is truly dear cannot be named or possessed. Excessive love leads to great expense. Chan teaches that attachment is the root of suffering regardless of what is attached to. Love itself is not the problem. Excessive love that clings, that fears loss, that depends on the loved object for happiness, this love produces suffering in exact proportion to its intensity. Great completion seems lacking, yet its use is never exhausted. Great fullness seems empty, yet its use is never depleted. Great straightness seems bent. Great skill seems clumsy. Great eloquence seems hesitant. Agitation overcomes cold. Stillness overcomes heat. Clarity and stillness. Set all under heaven right. Great completion, what seems lacking? Seems lacking, the appearance of genuine fullness. Great fullness, what seems empty? Great straightness, what seems bent? Wang Bi, philosophical. Describing the appearance of the sage ruler. Great completion seems lacking. The ruler who has truly accomplished great governance does not appear to have accomplished anything. The state runs smoothly, people live in peace, there is nothing remarkable to report. This lack of appearance is the sign of genuine achievement. The ruler whose accomplishments are visible has not accomplished much. What truly succeeds leaves no trace. Heshang Gong, cultivation. There is no glow, no special presence, no obvious sign. The cultivator who displays impressive signs has not completed the work that is complete leaves no residue. Great skill seems clumsy in cultivation. This means that genuine practice does not look impressive. The posture that produces results is not the posture that looks striking. The breath that transforms is not the breath that demonstrates control. Agitation overcomes cold, stillness overcomes heat. Heshang Gong applies this to the body's relationship with the seasons and with internal states. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. What is truly complete includes everything, even apparent incompleteness. Great eloquence seems hesitant, the Dharma talk that hesitates, that seems uncertain, that does not flow smoothly with impressive rhetoric, this talk may contain what the polished sermon cannot. The master who seems to stumble in teaching is reaching for what cannot be easily said. Clarity and stillness become the standard. Chan practice aims precisely at this, a mind that is clear and still, from which all appropriate response arises. This is not emptiness as absence, but emptiness as infinite potential. Internal martial arts. Describing the appearance of mastery. Great completion seems lacking, the master's form does not look impressive. There is nothing flashy, nothing that announces skill. The student watching for the first time might see nothing special. Only in contact does the student discover what that unremarkable appearance contains. Great skill seems clumsy, the highest martial skill appears awkward because it has transcended the smooth, coordinated movements that look skillful. The master moves in ways that conventional martial understanding cannot parse. When the Tao prevails in the world, swift horses are returned to fertilize the fields. When the Tao is absent from the world, war horses breed in the borderlands. No misfortune is greater than not knowing contentment. No fault is greater than desiring to acquire. Therefore, the contentment of knowing contentment is lasting contentment. Has the Tao, the state in which the Tao prevails. Lacks the Tao, the state in which the Tao is absent. Swift horses, instruments of war redirected to peace. Fun. Manure, what war horses carry when the Tao prevails. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Heshang Gong reads the contrast between Tao present and Tao absent as describing internal states. When the Tao prevails in the practitioner, this means when practice is aligned with natural principles. The swift horses represent the active energies of the body, which, when the Tao prevails, are directed toward cultivation rather than dissipation. When the Tao is absent, the same energies become destructive, breeding conflict and exhaustion. No misfortune is greater than not knowing contentment. Heshang Gong applies this directly to cultivation. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. As pointing to the fundamental choice that underlies all other choices. When the Tao prevails, war horses haul manure, the aggressive, competitive, grasping mind is transformed into service of life. The same energy that created suffering now creates benefit. This is not suppression of energy but redirection. When the Tao is absent, war horses breed in the borderlands, the grasping mind multiplies its strategies, breeds new desires, prepares for conflicts that its own wanting creates. No fault is greater than desiring to acquire. Chan might call this the root of samsara. Internal martial arts. The contentment of knowing contentment. The master who knows enough does not need to demonstrate anything. The skills are present but need not be displayed. The power is real but need not be proven. When practice has the Tao, the training hall produces health, community, and the slow deepening of character that comes from years of disciplined work. Students arrive injured by the world and leave more whole. The skills developed serve life, confidence without arrogance, physical capability without the compulsion to use it, the quiet knowledge that one can handle what comes. Wang Bi, philosophical. Describing the relationship between inner disposition and outer condition. When the Tao prevails, this is not a description of external circumstances imposed from above, but of what happens when rulers and people embody the Tao's principles. The swift horses returned to hauling manure represent the transformation of aggression into productivity, of competition into cooperation. No misfortune is greater than not knowing contentment. Wang Bi would emphasize that this is the root cause of all political instability. Without going out the door, know the world. Without looking through the window, see the way of heaven. The further one travels, the less one knows. Therefore the sage knows without going, names without seeing, Accomplishes without acting. Hu. Door, the boundary between inner and outer. Jr. No understanding that does not require travel. The world, what can be known without going out. Yo. Window, what need not be looked through. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. Without looking through the window, see the way of heaven, the Tao, Buddha nature, original mind all point to what is always present, requiring no journey to reach because it is the starting point of any journey. The further one travels, the less one knows. Chan has many stories of students who traveled for years seeking enlightenment, only to discover that what they sought had been present from the beginning. The search itself becomes the obstacle. Accomplishes without acting, this is the accomplishment of enlightenment. Nothing is done, yet everything is changed. Internal martial arts. Knows without going, the master perceives the opponent's plan without needing to see the attack. The subtle signs, shifts in weight, changes in breath, alterations in gaze, reveal what is coming before it comes. Accomplishes without acting, the highest martial accomplishment is victory without fighting. The master whose presence is sufficient to deter aggression has accomplished everything without doing anything. The encounter that does not happen is the encounter that is won completely. Wang Bi, philosophical. Describing the knowledge that makes governance effective. Without going out the door, know the world, Wang Bi would emphasize that the sage ruler does not need to travel throughout the realm to understand it. Understanding comes from grasping principles, not from accumulating observations. The ruler who understands human nature, who perceives the Tao's operation, can govern without needing to personally investigate every situation. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Describing the inner journey of cultivation. Without going out the door, know the world, the practitioner who goes within discovers that the microcosm contains the macrocosm. The body is a universe. What operates within operates everywhere. To know this inner world thoroughly is to know the outer world's principles. Without looking through the window, see the way of heaven, the Tao that operates in the cosmos operates identically in the practitioner's body. To perceive its operation within is to understand its operation everywhere. In pursuit of learning, daily increase. In pursuit of the Tao, daily decrease. Decrease and again decrease. Until arriving at non-action. Non-action, yet nothing is left undone. To govern the world, always act without interference. When there is interference, this is not sufficient to govern the world. Shui. Learning, what increases daily in ordinary pursuit. Tao. The way, what is pursued through daily decrease. Yi. Increase, what learning produces. Swan. Decrease, reduce, what pursuing the Tao requires. Internal martial arts. Each day the repertoire expands. This is necessary but limited. In pursuit of the Tao, daily decrease, the advanced practitioner simplifies. Techniques merge, distinctions dissolve. What seemed like many becomes one. Decrease until arriving at non-action, the master has reduced everything to a single principle that manifests in infinite forms. There is no technique because every movement is technique. There is no form because every form is formless. Nothing is left undone. The master who does not do anything has the capacity to do everything. Wang Bi, philosophical. Each day the apparatus of government grows. In pursuit of the Tao, daily decrease, the sage ruler moves in the opposite direction. Each day something is removed, unnecessary laws, superfluous regulations, redundant interventions. Decrease until arriving at non-action, Wang Bi interprets this as the goal of enlightened governance. The state that runs itself requires no management, the people who govern themselves require no ruler. This is not abdication but the highest form of rule, creating conditions in which intervention becomes unnecessary. Heshang Gong, cultivation. More to maintain, more to remember, more to apply. In pursuit of the Tao, Daily decrease, the effective practitioner removes rather than adds. Each day some unnecessary effort is released, some habitual tension is dissolved, some mental complication is simplified. Decrease until arriving at non-action. Heshang Gong applies this directly to meditation. The goal is not to do something with the breath, the energy, the mind, but to stop doing what interferes with their natural function. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. Each day the mind becomes more furnished. In pursuit of the Tao, daily decrease enlightenment moves in the opposite direction. Each day some concept is released, some framework is abandoned, some understanding is seen through. The mind becomes less furnished. Decrease until arriving at non-action. This is the emptying that precedes realization. What remains when all acquired content is removed? Not nothing, but original mind, the awareness that was present before anything was added. Non-action, yet nothing is left undone. This is the functioning of enlightened mind. The sage has no fixed mind. The people's mind is the sage's mind. Those who are good, I treat with goodness. Those who are not good, I also treat with goodness. This is the virtue of goodness. Those who are trustworthy, I trust. Those who are not trustworthy, I also trust. This is the virtue of trust. The sage in the world breathes in, blending all minds into one. The people fix their eyes and ears upon the sage. The sage regards them all as children. No fixed mind, the sage's fundamental openness. 100 surnames, the common people. Shan. Good, goodness, what is extended to all. Virtue of goodness attained through unconditional goodness. Wang Bi, philosophical. The people's mind is the sage's mind. The effective ruler governs by understanding what the people actually need rather than imposing what the ruler thinks they should want. Those who are not good, I also treat with goodness. Wang Bi interprets this as strategic wisdom, not mere sentiment. The ruler who responds to badness with punishment may suppress behavior but creates resentment. The ruler who responds with goodness transforms behavior at its root. Regards them all as children. This is not condescension but care. Heshang Gong, cultivation. The people's mind becomes the multiplicity within, the various impulses, desires, fears, and tendencies that constitute the inner population. Those who are not good, I also treat with goodness. Heshang Gong applies this to internal practice. The emotions that seem negative, the thoughts that seem disruptive, the tendencies that seem problematic, all are met with the same acceptance. This is not indulgence but transformation. What is accepted can change, what is resisted solidifies. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. Such mind is empty yet responsive, formless yet functioning. The people's mind is the sage's mind. There is no separation between sage and people, no boundary between self and other. What appears as multiplicity is recognized as the single awareness manifesting. Those who are not trustworthy, I also trust. Chan practice requires trusting the process even when the process seems to lead nowhere. The student who trusts only when practice produces pleasant results has not really trusted. Trust that depends on outcomes is not trust but calculation. Internal martial arts. Those who are not good, I also treat with goodness. In martial terms, this means meeting aggression without aggression. The opponent who attacks is not met with counter-aggression but with the same calm readiness that would meet a friend. This is not weakness but supreme strength. The fighter who cannot be provoked cannot be manipulated. Regards them all as children. The master sees the opponent's attacks as the movements of a child, not to be feared or resented but understood and guided. What seems dangerous becomes manageable when viewed from this perspective. Coming forth is life, entering is death. 3 in 10 follow the path of life. 3 in 10 follow the path of death. 3 in 10, though alive, move toward the place of death. Why is this so? Because they cling to life too fiercely. I have heard that one skilled at nourishing life travels the land without meeting rhinoceros or tiger, enters battle without wearing armor or weapons. The rhinoceros finds no place to thrust its horn. The tiger finds no place to sink its claws. Weapons find no place to lodge their blades. Why is this so? Because such a one has no place of death. Coming forth into life, birth as emergence. Entering death, death as entering. Followers of life, 3 in 10. Followers of death, 3 in 10. Heshang Gong, cultivation. 3 in 10 follow the path of life. These are practitioners who cultivate correctly, aligning with life-promoting principles. 3 in 10 follow the path of death. These are those who cultivate incorrectly, depleting rather than building vitality. 3 in 10 move toward death. These are practitioners who over-cultivate, forcing practices that should be gentle, accumulating energy that should circulate, grasping at states that should be released. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. As pointing to the nature of attachment and its transcendence. 3 in 10 follow the path of life. These are attached to existence. 3 in 10 follow the path of death. These are attached to non-existence. 3 in 10 move toward death. These are attached to both, grasping at life while being pulled toward death. The remaining 1 in 10, neither attached to life nor to death, and therefore free of both. Because they live life too thickly, Chan might call this the attachment to being, the grasping at existence that is itself a form of suffering. Internal martial arts. The rhinoceros finds no place to thrust its horn. The master who has no form offers no target. Attack requires a fixed position to attack. The one who has no fixed position cannot be attacked. Has no place of death. This is the ultimate martial teaching. The fighter who offers no target, who has no attachment to outcome, who neither advances nor retreats but simply responds, this fighter has transcended the categories of victory and defeat. What cannot be located cannot be struck, what is not attached cannot be grasped, what does not contend cannot be overcome. Wang Bi, philosophical. The ruler who taxes excessively weakens the state that supports him, the general who seeks glory creates the defeat he fears, the merchant who grasps for profit loses the relationships on which profit depends. Because they live life too thickly, Wang Bi interprets this as the fundamental error of those who pursue life through accumulation. The one who piles up defenses creates the vulnerability that defenses are supposed to prevent. The one who grasps at security produces the very insecurity that grasping was supposed to address. The Tao gives birth to them. Virtue nurtures them. Matter shapes them. Circumstance completes them. Therefore all things revere the Tao and honor virtue. The Tao is revered. Virtue is honored. Not by decree but always naturally. So the Tao gives birth. Virtue nurtures, raises and develops, steadies and ripens, feeds and shelters. To give birth without possessing. To act without claiming. To lead without dominating. This is called mysterious virtue. The Tao gives birth, the source of existence. Virtue nurtures, the sustaining power. Matter shapes, the physical aspect. Circumstance completes, the contextual aspect. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. The Tao gives birth. Original mind is the source from which all experience arises. Virtue nurtures, the practice that tends this original mind allows what was always present to become manifest. No new thing is created, what was hidden is revealed. Not by decree but naturally. Enlightenment cannot be commanded, forced, or achieved through effort alone. It arises naturally when the conditions are right. To give birth without possessing, the enlightened one does not claim enlightenment. The teaching that produces awakening in others is not held as a possession. Internal martial arts. Both must be present. the physical structure that can express internal power, and the practice context in which that expression is developed. To lead without dominating, the internal martial artist who has achieved genuine mastery does not overpower opponents through force. Instead, the master leads the opponent into positions of disadvantage without the opponent knowing they are being led. This is the mysterious virtue in combat: control without apparent control, leadership without visible leadership. Wang Bi, philosophical. Describing the metaphysical structure of reality. The Tao gives birth. The Tao is the ultimate source, the non-being from which all being emerges. Virtue nurtures. Virtue is the manifestation of the Tao in each particular thing, the power by which each thing becomes what it is. Wang Bi emphasizes that this process is entirely natural. No external authority decrees how things should develop. To give birth without possessing, Wang Bi applies this to governance. The sage ruler creates conditions for flourishing but does not claim ownership of what flourishes. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Describing the process of internal cultivation. The Tao gives birth in the practitioner. This is the original nature, the primordial vitality that is the source of all development. Virtue nurtures. This is the cultivation that allows that original nature to develop. The practitioner does not create the seed but tends the garden in which the seed grows. Matter shapes, circumstance completes. Heshang Gong applies this to the body and its environment. The body is matter, the conditions of practice are circumstance. Both are necessary for the transformation that cultivation produces. The world has a beginning. That is the mother of the world. Having found the mother, know the children. Knowing the children, return and hold to the mother. To the end of life, no danger. Block the openings. Close the gates. And to the end of life, no toil. Open the openings. Meddle in affairs. And to the end of life, no remedy. Seeing the small is called clarity. Holding to the soft is called strength. Use the light. Return to clarity, leaving no calamity to the self. This is called practicing the constant. Sha. Beginning, the origin that is always present. Mu. Mother, the source that gives birth. Diza. Children, the manifestations of the source. Shou. Guard, hold, maintaining connection to source. Internal martial arts. Block the openings, close the gates. The martial artist who conserves energy does not waste it through unnecessary movement, tension, or emotional reactivity. The openings through which energy leaks must be blocked, the gates through which power dissipates must be closed. Seeing the small, the master perceives the subtle beginnings of the opponent's movement, the tiny shifts in weight or breath that precede action. Holding to the soft, the strength that defeats opponents is the softness that cannot be broken, that absorbs force without shattering, that endures without exhausting. Wang Bi, philosophical. But understanding manifestations is not the goal. The goal is to return to the principle that produces them. Block the openings, close the gates. Wang Bi interprets this as withdrawing from the endless engagement that governance often requires. The effective ruler does not try to know everything, manage everything, control everything. By withdrawing from excessive engagement, the ruler preserves the capacity for effective engagement when it matters. Seeing the small is called clarity. The effective ruler perceives problems when they are small, before they become large and unmanageable. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Block the openings, close the gates. Heshang Gong applies this literally to the practice of withdrawing the senses, closing the eyes, reducing external stimulation. This is not permanent withdrawal but the temporary closing that allows internal energy to accumulate rather than scatter. Seeing the small, the practitioner develops sensitivity to subtle internal movements, the beginnings of energy circulation, the first stirrings of transformation. Holding to the soft, the cultivation that develops genuine strength is soft cultivation, not forced, not strained. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. as describing the return to original mind. The world has a beginning, that is the mother. Original mind is the source from which all experience arises. All the children, all phenomena, all thoughts, all experiences emerge from this single source. Having found the mother, know the children. Enlightenment allows understanding of all phenomena as manifestations of original mind. But knowing the children is not sufficient. The essential movement is return. Block the openings, close the gates. In Chan practice, this is the withdrawal from sensory engagement that deepens meditation. If I have even a little knowledge, walking the great way, my only fear is straying. The great way is very level. Yet people prefer the byways. The court is immaculate. The fields are overgrown. The granaries are empty. They wear elegant clothes, carry sharp swords, are glutted with food and drink, possess wealth in abundance. This is called the boasting of thieves. It is not the way. Slightly, barely, humble knowledge. Great way, the simple path. Way. Fear what the wise person fears. Level, smooth, the nature of the great way. Wang Bi, philosophical. The principles are simple. Produce what is needed, distribute what is produced, maintain what is essential. The bypaths that people prefer are the clever schemes, the short-term gains, the policies that benefit the few at the expense of the many. The court is immaculate, the fields are overgrown. Wang Bi interprets this as the fundamental inversion of misgovernment. The center is maintained at the expense of the periphery, the palace flourishes while the farmland fails. This is governance that has lost the way because it has forgotten what governance is for. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Relevant to both political and personal cultivation. If I have even a little knowledge, the practitioner who has genuinely contacted the way maintains humility. The knowledge is not great, it is just enough to walk the way. The fear is straying, losing contact with the simplicity that has been found. People prefer the byways. Heshang Gong applies this to cultivation practice. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. As describing the relationship between authentic practice and its corruption. The great way is very level. Enlightenment is not complicated. It does not require elaborate techniques, extensive learning, or extraordinary circumstances. The way is level, it is available to everyone. Yet people prefer the byways. People seek the impressive, the unusual, the complicated. They prefer spiritual tourism to actual practice. Internal martial arts. A critique of martial corruption. The great way is very level. Genuine martial development follows simple principles, correct alignment, relaxed attention, patient practice. The way is not secret or complicated, it is level, available, straightforward. Yet people prefer the byways. The martial world is full of bypaths, impressive-looking techniques that do not work, secret teachings that promise shortcuts, elaborate systems that substitute complexity for depth. What is well established cannot be uprooted. What is well embraced cannot slip away. Thus descendants honor ancestors with offerings that never cease. Cultivate it in the self. Virtue becomes genuine. Cultivate it in the family. Virtue becomes abundant. Cultivate it in the community. Virtue becomes lasting. Cultivate it in the state. Virtue becomes flourishing. Cultivate it in the world. Virtue becomes universal. Therefore, through the self, observe the self. Through the family, observe the family. Through the community, observe the community. Through the state, observe the state. Through the world, observe the world. How do I know the world is so? By this. Well established, what cannot be uprooted. Well embraced, what cannot slip away. Descendants, the continuation. Shayo. Cultivate, the active process. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Describing the progressive development and expansion of cultivation. What is well established cannot be uprooted. In cultivation terms, what is genuinely developed becomes permanent. The practitioner who has truly transformed does not fall back. The cultivation that has genuinely taken root remains through all circumstances. Cultivate it in the self, virtue becomes genuine. Heshang Gong sees this as describing the foundation. All cultivation begins in the body, in the breath, in the basic practices. Without this foundation, nothing else is possible. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. What is well established cannot be uprooted. Genuine realization does not come and go. The understanding that truly takes root remains. The enlightenment that is genuine cannot be lost regardless of circumstances. Cultivate it in the self, virtue becomes genuine. Chan begins with the individual, with direct investigation of one's own mind. No external teaching substitutes for this direct looking. Cultivate it in the world, virtue becomes universal. The natural functioning of enlightened mind benefits everything it contacts, not through deliberate action but through its simple presence. Internal martial arts. Describing the development and transmission of genuine skill. What is well established cannot be uprooted. The skills that are genuinely developed in the body cannot be taken away. No one can remove what has been internalized. No circumstance can eliminate what has been truly learned. Cultivate it in the self, virtue becomes genuine. The foundation of all martial development is personal practice. No teacher can put skill into a student's body. The student must cultivate it themselves. Wang Bi, philosophical. What is established according to the Tao has the stability of the Tao itself. What is established against the Tao is inherently unstable regardless of how much power supports it. Cultivate it in the self, virtue becomes genuine. Wang Bi interprets this as the necessary starting point. All social virtue must begin with individual cultivation. No amount of external structure can substitute for internal reality. The ruler who would have virtuous subjects must first be virtuous. The teacher who would produce virtuous students must first embody virtue. One who embodies virtue's fullness is like a newborn child. Wasps and scorpions do not sting it. Fierce beasts do not seize it. Birds of prey do not strike it. Its bones are weak, its sinews soft. Yet its grip is firm. Not yet knowing the union of male and female. Yet its member stirs. The height of essence. Crying all day without becoming hoarse. The height of harmony. Knowing harmony is called the constant. Knowing the constant is called clarity. Forcing life is called ominous. The mind forcing the vital energy is called rigidity. Things that are strong grow old. This is called not following the way. What does not follow the way comes to an early end. Embodies virtue, holds virtue within. Newborn child, the image of virtue's fullness. Bones weak, sinews soft, the paradox of strength. Firm grip, what softness produces. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. The infant has no position to defend, no self-image to maintain, no fixed identity to protect. Wasps and scorpions do not sting it. The being that offers no opposition provokes no attack. Chan teaches that conflict arises from the fixed positions of ego. The mind that has no fixed position cannot be struck because there is nothing to strike against. Knowing harmony is called the constant. This constant is original mind itself, always present beneath the fluctuations of thought and emotion. Internal martial arts. The master appears soft, yielding, almost weak, yet contact reveals an unexpected firmness that does not depend on muscular tension. The height of essence. The height of harmony, these are what internal practice develops. Fullness of vitality that has not been wasted, harmony of movement that wastes no energy. The mind forcing the vital energy is called rigidity. The martial artist who uses force against force, who meets strength with strength, who tries to impose will through effort, this is rigidity. Wang Bi, philosophical. Describing the qualities that accompany alignment with the Tao. Like a newborn child, Wang Bi would emphasize that the infant is not yet separated from its source. The newborn has not accumulated the habits, preferences, and fixed positions that constitute a hardened self. This is not praise of ignorance but description of a state before differentiation has created opposition. Its bones are weak, its sinews soft, yet its grip is firm. Wang Bi interprets this as the paradox of true power. What is soft and yielding contains more real strength than what is hard and rigid. Heshang Gong, cultivation. The infant represents Jing, essence, that is full, Qi, energy, that is complete, Shun, spirit, that is undisturbed. Not yet knowing the union of male and female, yet its member stirs. Heshang Gong interprets this as describing the fullness of Jing in the uncorrupted state. The practitioner who cultivates correctly returns to this fullness, not by abstaining from all activity but by not wasting the fundamental energies. Crying all day without becoming hoarse, this describes energy that circulates without depletion. Those who know do not speak. Those who speak do not know. Block the openings. Close the gates. Blunt the sharpness. Untangle the knots. Soften the glare. Settle with the dust. This is called mysterious sameness. Therefore such a one cannot be drawn near, cannot be pushed away, cannot be benefited, cannot be harmed, cannot be honored, cannot be disgraced. Therefore such a one is honored by the world. Those who know genuine realization do not speak silence of true understanding. Block the openings, withdraw from sensory engagement. Close the gates, reduce external involvement. Internal martial arts. Describing the highest level of development. Those who know do not speak. The master does not explain their skill because genuine martial ability cannot be transmitted through words. The student must feel it, experience it, develop it through years of practice. The teacher who talks too much is often compensating for what they cannot demonstrate. This is also the principle of listening energy, Ting Jin, listening energy, the capacity to sense an opponent's intention through touch rather than through thought. Wang Bi, philosophical. Wang Bi would further note that the 6 negations cannot be drawn near or pushed away, benefited or harmed, honored or disgraced are not 6 separate accomplishments but a single condition, freedom from all relational categories. When the sage embodies nothingness, these paired opposites collapse simultaneously, because there is no fixed position from which nearness or distance, profit or injury, could be measured. The sage is not standing at a midpoint between extremes but has dissolved the axis along which extremes are plotted. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Directly relevant to cultivation practice. Those who know do not speak. The practitioner who has realized internal truth does not parade this realization but maintains silence. Speaking about practice invites comparison, competition, and the ego gratifications that undermine genuine development. More practically, speech itself scatters qi. The cultivator who guards silence preserves the vital energies that would otherwise dissipate through unnecessary expression. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. This is not evasion but the most direct answer possible. The one who has realized the Tao cannot name what they are, because what they are has no name. Mysterious sameness, this is the realization of original nature, which is not different from all things because all things arise from the same source. The enlightened one has dissolved the boundaries that seem to separate self from world, subject from object. Chan would identify Xian Tong directly with Bu non-duality, the insight that all apparent opposites share a single ground. Govern the state with rectitude. Wage war with surprise. Win the world through non-interference. How do I know this is so? By this. When there are many prohibitions, the people grow poorer. When the people have many weapons, the state falls into chaos. When people have many skills, strange things proliferate. When laws are more prominent, thieves and robbers multiply. Therefore the sage says, I practice non-action, and the people transform themselves. I love stillness, and the people correct themselves. I have no affairs, and the people prosper by themselves. I have no desires, and the people become simple by themselves. Zheng. Rectitude, the direct method. Qi. Surprise, the strategic method. Non-interference, the Tao's method. Prohibitions, what restricts the people. Wang Bi, philosophical. When laws are more prominent, thieves multiply. Wang Bi would emphasize this paradox. Every law creates its own transgression. The law against theft creates the category of thief. The more detailed the laws, the more detailed the crimes. The sage ruler who governs through non-interference avoids this multiplication of disorder. The people transform themselves. The transformation is genuine because it arises from within rather than being imposed from without. This is the only transformation that lasts. Heshang Gong, cultivation. I love stillness, and the people correct themselves in cultivation. This is the principle that when the mind is still, the body's natural healing functions activate. The practitioner who tries too hard, who interferes with natural process, creates the very disorders they seek to cure. I have no desires, and the people become simple. When the mind stops generating desires, the body-mind system returns to simplicity. Complexity arises from desire. Simplicity returns when desire ceases. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. When laws are more prominent, thieves multiply. In Chan terms, the more rules imposed on the mind, the more the mind rebels. The teacher who gives too many instructions creates confusion. The teacher who remains still allows clarity to emerge. I do nothing, and they transform themselves. This is the Chan method. The master does not give enlightenment but creates conditions in which enlightenment can occur naturally. I have no desires, and they become simple. The master who has no agenda for students allows students to discover their own natural simplicity. Internal martial arts. Describing the hierarchy of combat methods. Wage war with surprise. The beginning fighter relies on strategy, on the unexpected technique, on superior speed or power. Win through non-interference. The mature practitioner transcends strategy by not opposing, by allowing the opponent's force to defeat itself. I do nothing, and they transform themselves in combat. This is the principle that the opponent transforms themselves when the practitioner provides no resistance to transform against. The opponent's own force becomes their undoing. When governance is muffled and obscure, the people are genuine and simple. When governance is sharp and penetrating, the people are crafty and wanting. Misfortune, fortune leans upon it. Fortune, misfortune hides within it. Who knows where it ends? There is no fixed standard. The correct becomes strange. The good becomes perverse. People's confusion has indeed lasted long. Therefore the sage is square but does not cut, angular but does not pierce, straight but does not impose, bright but does not dazzle. Muffled, obscure, governance that does not penetrate. Genuine, simple, the people's natural state. Sharp, penetrating, excessive scrutiny. Deficient, cunning, what scrutiny produces. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Applicable to the cultivation of both body and society. Muffled governance in the body. This is the mind that does not interfere with natural processes, allowing the organs and energies to function without excessive control. Sharp governance, the mind that monitors everything, creating tension and dysfunction. Fortune and misfortune contain each other. Heshang Gong applies this to cultivation. the success that creates complacency, the difficulty that produces breakthrough. Bodhidharma Chan Zen, as describing the enlightened state and the path to it. Fortune and misfortune contain each other. This is the teaching of emptiness. No state is permanent, no experience is absolute. What seems like progress may be regression, what seems like failure may be breakthrough. The practitioner who understands this stops grasping at states and simply remains present. Who knows where it ends? There is no fixed standard. Chan emphasizes this. There is no formula for enlightenment, no technique that always works, no position that is finally correct. Internal martial arts. Describing the relationship between control and effectiveness. Muffled governance, the internal artist who does not try to control every detail of movement produces naturally effective technique. Sharp governance, the practitioner who analyzes every motion creates stiffness and predictability. Fortune and misfortune contain each other in combat. Victory contains the seeds of defeat when it produces overconfidence. Defeat contains the seeds of victory when it produces learning. Wang Bi, philosophical. Fortune and misfortune contain each other. Wang Bi sees this as describing the fundamental instability of all positions. Every state contains its opposite. Every achievement contains the seeds of its reversal. The sage navigates this instability not by finding a fixed position but by maintaining qualities without their harmful extremes, square without cutting, bright without blinding. This is the practical wisdom that emerges from understanding the Tao's transformative nature. Su. Frugality, conservation of resources. Early return, returning before depletion. Deeply accumulate virtue, building reserves. Nothing cannot be overcome, unlimited capacity. Bodhidharma Chan Zen. Every distraction depletes the resources available for awakening. Early return, the practitioner catches distraction early, returns to presence quickly, does not wait for complete absorption in delusion before returning. Deeply accumulating virtue in Chan, this is the gradual transformation that underlies sudden awakening. The practice that seems to produce nothing is actually accumulating the conditions for breakthrough. No one knows one's limits. The awakened one has no fixed limits because they are not identified with any particular capacity or achievement. Internal martial arts. Every movement is economical, nothing is wasted. Early return, after each expression of power, the internal artist returns immediately to center, to stillness, to readiness. Deeply accumulating virtue, the years of correct practice build internal reserves that external training cannot match. Power that comes from deep internal development is inexhaustible compared to power that depends on muscular strength alone. No one knows one's limits. The master whose development is genuine appears to have no limits because their power seems always greater than what the situation requires. Wang Bi, philosophical. Nothing compares to frugality. The effective ruler does not squander the resources of the state, whether material, human, or moral. Every unnecessary expenditure weakens the foundation. Every unnecessary action depletes reserves. Deep roots and firm foundation. Wang Bi would emphasize that political stability comes from the same source as personal stability. Deep connection to underlying principle, careful husbandry of resources, early attention to problems before they grow large. The ruler whose virtue is deeply accumulated can face any crisis because they have reserves to draw upon. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Early return, the practitioner returns early to stillness, returns early to the source, does not wait until depletion forces retreat. Deep roots and firm foundation, the practitioner who has established genuine foundation through years of correct practice cannot be uprooted by circumstance. External changes cannot disturb what has been firmly established within. Long life and lasting vision, not mere longevity but the sustained clarity and vitality that come from correct cultivation. Governing a great state is like cooking a small fish. When the Tao is used to guide the world, spirits lose their potency. Not that spirits lose their potency, but their power does not harm people. Not that their power does not harm people, but the sage also does not harm people. When neither harms the other, virtue returns and accumulates in both. Governing a great state, the application. Cooking small fish, the principle. Using Tao to guide alignment with principle. Ghosts lose power, harmony neutralizes disruption. Internal martial arts. Describing the principle of non-interference in combat and training. Like cooking a small fish, the internal artist does not force development but allows it to emerge through correct, patient practice. Excessive effort, like excessive stirring, destroys the delicate processes of internal transformation. When the Tao is used, ghosts do not harm in combat. When the internal artist moves in accord with natural principle, the opponent's attacks lose their effectiveness. Not that the opponent stops attacking, but the attacks cannot find solid target, cannot generate the harm intended. Wang Bi, philosophical. The ruler who constantly interferes, who adjusts policies repeatedly, who scrutinizes every detail, destroys the natural coherence of the state just as constant stirring destroys delicate fish. Ghosts lose their supernatural power. Wang Bi interprets this metaphorically. When governance accords with the Tao, the forces of disorder and disruption lose their capacity to disturb the social order. Not that these forces disappear, but they cannot gain traction in a harmonious environment. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Applicable to both governance and internal cultivation. Like cooking a small fish in the body, this is the principle that internal processes should not be forced or overly controlled. The practitioner who constantly interferes with natural energy flows damages the subtle mechanisms of transformation. Light attention, minimal intervention, patient observation, these allow internal alchemy to proceed. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. Like cooking a small fish, the mind should be observed without constant manipulation. The practitioner who tries to control every thought, who reacts to every disturbance, who constantly stirs the waters of consciousness, prevents the natural settling that allows clarity to emerge. Ghosts do not harm in Chan. The ghosts can be understood as the disturbing thoughts, emotions, and memories that arise in meditation. When practice accords with the Tao, or the Dharma, these mental contents lose their power to disturb. The great state is like a lowly river, the meeting point of all under heaven, the female of the world. The female always overcomes the male through stillness. Through stillness, she takes the lower position. Therefore, if the great state takes the lower position toward the small state, it wins the small state. If the small state takes the lower position toward the great state, it wins the great state. Therefore, the one lowers itself to attract, the other lowers itself and is taken in. The great state desires only to embrace and nurture all. The small state desires only to enter and serve. When both obtain what they desire, the greater should take the lower position. Great state, power that has responsibility. Lowly river, the gathering point of all waters. Meeting point of all, where all converge. Peen. Female, the receptive, yielding principle. Wang Bi, philosophical. The great state that follows this principle does not degrade itself but fulfills its nature as a gathering point for lesser states. The female overcomes the male through stillness. Wang Bi interprets this as the superiority of receptivity over aggression in the long term. The aggressive force expends itself against what does not resist. The receptive force accumulates what the aggressive force cannot hold. The greater should take the lower position. The responsibility increases with power. The small state that submits does what it must. The great state that descends does what is noble. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Applicable to the relationship between different aspects of the self in cultivation. The great state is like a lowly river in the body. The major organs and energy centers should not dominate but should create conditions for the whole system to function. The heart that seeks to control everything creates tension. The heart that receives creates harmony. The female overcomes the male through stillness in cultivation. This is the principle that Yin practices. Stillness, receiving, gathering, ultimately accomplish more than Yang practices, forcing, projecting, scattering. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. As describing the relationship between teacher and student, between the enlightened and those seeking enlightenment. The great state is like a lowly river. The master does not elevate themselves above students but creates conditions in which students naturally converge. The master who demands submission creates resistance. The master who descends creates attraction. The female overcomes the male through stillness. In Chan terms, silence often teaches more than words, presence more than instruction. Internal martial arts. The female overcomes the male through stillness. This principle appears wherever martial arts mature beyond the early reliance on strength and speed. The aggressive fighter exhausts themselves against what does not resist. The yielding practitioner uses the opponent's force against them. The greater should take the lower position. The more skilled martial artist has the responsibility to yield, not because they cannot dominate but because domination is the lesser path. The highest victory is one in which both parties benefit. The Tao is the sanctuary of all things, treasure of the good person, protection of the one who is not good. Beautiful words can be traded in the marketplace. Noble conduct can win respect among people. But those who are not good, why should they be abandoned? Therefore, when the Son of Heaven is enthroned, and the 3 ministers are installed, though one presents jade discs, followed by teams of 4 horses, this cannot compare to sitting still and offering this Tao. Why did the ancients prize this Tao so highly? Did they not say, "Through it, those who seek will find. Through it, those with guilt will be pardoned"? Therefore it is the most honored thing under heaven. Oh, sanctuary, innermost chamber, the Tao's mysterious depth. Good person's treasure, cultivation of the Tao. Protection for the not good, refuge for those who have strayed. Beautiful words can trade, eloquence has worldly value. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Directly relevant to cultivation practice. The Tao is the sanctuary of all things in cultivation. The Tao is the return point, the original nature to which the practitioner returns through practice. All the wanderings of mind and energy, all the dispersions of essence, can be gathered again through return to the Tao. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. As describing the nature of Buddha nature and its universal availability. The Tao is the sanctuary of all things in Chan terms. This is the original mind, the Buddha nature that is the ground of all beings. It is not something acquired but something recognized, not something created but something returned to. Those who are not good, why should they be abandoned? This is the Chan teaching of universal Buddha nature. No being is excluded, no one is beyond awakening. The thief and the monk, the ignorant and the wise, all have this nature and all can realize it. Internal martial arts. Describing the internal art's relationship to the Tao. The Tao is the sanctuary of all things. The internal artist returns constantly to center, to the ground of practice that all techniques emerge from and return to. This center is the martial artist's sanctuary, the place of recovery and the source of power. Treasure of the good, protection of the not good. For the skilled practitioner, the Tao is a treasure of refined ability. For the struggling student, it is the protection that allows continued development despite failures. Wang Bi, philosophical. Establishing the Tao's unique value compared to all worldly goods. The Tao is the sanctuary of all things. Wang Bi would emphasize that the Tao is not merely the source but the continuing refuge. All things emerge from the Tao and all things can return to it. This is not mere metaphysics but practical wisdom. When one knows the sanctuary, one can never be truly lost. Those who are not good, why should they be abandoned? Wang Bi sees this as crucial. The Tao's universality means it excludes no one. The person who has erred can still return. The path remains open regardless of past actions. Act without acting. Manage affairs without managing. Taste without tasting. Regard the small as great, the few as many. Repay resentment with virtue. Plan for the difficult while it is still easy. Accomplish the great through the small. All difficult things under heaven arise from what is easy. All great things under heaven arise from what is small. Therefore the sage never attempts the great, and thereby accomplishes the great. Those who make promises lightly rarely keep their word. Those who find everything easy will find everything difficult. Therefore the sage regards things as difficult, and in the end has no difficulty. Act without acting, effortless action. Manage without managing, non-interference. Taste without tasting, appreciation without grasping. Repay resentment with virtue, transformative response. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. The master who demonstrates this acts with perfect appropriateness while seeming to make no effort. Regard the small as great in Chan. This is attention to the present moment, to the apparently insignificant detail that is actually the whole of practice. Repay resentment with virtue. The practitioner who responds to difficulty with presence rather than reaction transforms the difficulty. The sage never attempts the great. Enlightenment is not achieved through ambitious projects but through moment-by-moment attention. Internal martial arts. Manage affairs without managing. In combat, the internal artist does not try to control the opponent but responds appropriately to whatever arises. Plan for the difficult while it is still easy. The internal artist addresses an attack in its beginning, before it develops power. Intercepting force in its early stage requires little effort. Meeting force at its peak requires great effort. The sage never attempts the great. The internal artist does not try to execute powerful techniques but attends to fundamentals: alignment, balance, connection to ground. Wang Bi, philosophical. Act without acting. Wang Bi would emphasize that Wu Wei is not passivity but action that accords with natural tendency. The sage acts in ways that do not create resistance because they follow rather than oppose the natural flow. All difficult things arise from what is easy. Wang Bi sees this as the fundamental principle of change. Nothing begins as itself, everything emerges from something simpler. The sage who understands transformation tends to processes in their early stages, when intervention is effective and easy. The sage never attempts the great. This is not modesty but wisdom. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Directly applicable to internal cultivation. Act without acting. In cultivation, this is the principle that genuine transformation occurs through allowing rather than forcing. The practitioner who tries too hard creates tension. The practitioner who yields to natural process allows energy to flow and transform. Plan for the difficult while it is still easy. In cultivation, this means addressing imbalances early, before they become serious disturbances. A slight deviation, addressed immediately, is easy to correct. The same deviation, allowed to develop, becomes a major obstruction. What is at rest is easy to hold. What has not yet appeared is easy to plan for. What is brittle is easy to break. What is minute is easy to scatter. Deal with things before they appear. Put things in order before there is disorder. A tree that fills the arms grows from a tiny sprout. A tower of 9 stories rises from a heap of earth. A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath your feet. Those who act will fail. Those who grasp will lose. Therefore the sage does not act, and so does not fail, does not grasp, and so does not lose. People in their undertakings often fail when nearly complete. Be as careful at the end as at the beginning, and there will be no failure. Therefore the sage desires not to desire, does not value goods hard to obtain, learns not to learn, returns to what others have passed by, to assist all things in their naturalness, and dares not impose. At rest, easy to hold, maintaining stability. Not yet appeared, easy to plan, early intervention. Brittle, easy to break, fragility yields to small force. Deal with before appearing, preventive action. Internal martial arts. The student who wants to fight before developing fundamentals will always be weak. The student who develops fundamentals patiently becomes genuinely powerful. Those who act will fail. The martial artist who forces technique loses connection to natural power. The sage desires not to desire. The mature practitioner releases attachment to winning, to demonstrating skill, to defeating opponents. From this release comes the freedom that makes genuine martial ability possible. Wang Bi, philosophical. Deal with things before they appear. Wang Bi would emphasize that the sage understands the relationship between potential and manifestation. Every difficulty was once easy to address, every great problem was once small. The sage who sees clearly intervenes at the appropriate moment, before the difficulty has fully formed. Those who act will fail. Wang Bi interprets this not as a rejection of all action, but as a warning against action that forces, that opposes natural tendency. The sage does not act. This is Wu Wei, not inaction but action that does not force. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Directly applicable to internal cultivation. What is at rest is easy to hold in cultivation. Maintaining a state is easier than achieving it. The practitioner who has reached stillness should maintain it carefully rather than seeking something beyond it. What has not yet appeared is easy to plan for. Imbalances addressed before they manifest are easily corrected. A tree that fills the arms grows from a tiny sprout in cultivation. Great achievement comes from small, consistent practice. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. As describing the enlightened relationship to practice and life. Deal with things before they appear. The awakened mind addresses tendencies before they become fixed patterns. A slight movement toward delusion, addressed immediately, is easily released. The same movement, allowed to develop, becomes entrenched habit. A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath your feet. Chan emphasizes this. Enlightenment is not somewhere else, achieved through great effort. It begins exactly where you are, with this breath, this moment. The ancients who were skilled in the Tao did not enlighten the people, but kept them simple. The people are difficult to govern, because they have too much cleverness. Therefore, to govern a state with cleverness is to rob the state. Not to govern with cleverness is the state's blessing. To know these two principles is to know the eternal pattern. Always knowing the eternal pattern is called mysterious virtue. Mysterious virtue is deep, far-reaching, and returns with all things to the source. Only then is there great accordance. Those skilled in the Tao, ancient masters, not to enlighten, avoiding cleverness, keeping them simple, original nature. Too much cleverness, the obstacle. Wang Bi, philosophical. The ancients kept them simple. Wang Bi would emphasize that simplicity is not ignorance but the absence of the artificial complications that clever governance creates. When rulers try to outsmart the people try to outsmart the rulers. The result is an escalating contest of cunning. To govern with cleverness is to rob the state. Wang Bi interprets this as describing the theft of natural order. Clever policies create loopholes. Loopholes create exploitation. Exploitation creates more policies. The cycle continues until the state is exhausted by its own complexity. Heshang Gong, cultivation. The people are difficult to govern because of too much cleverness in the body mind. This describes the difficulty of achieving stillness when the mind is full of schemes and plans. The calculating mind resists meditation because it cannot see the advantage. The simple mind naturally settles. Mysterious virtue is deep and far-reaching. This is the virtue that develops through years of simple practice, not through clever techniques. It operates beneath awareness, transforming without being noticed. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. The ancients kept them simple. The great teachers do not fill students with concepts but point them back to their original simplicity. The mind before thinking complicated it. The people have too much cleverness. Chan would recognize this as describing the obstacle of excessive conceptualization. The more the student knows about enlightenment, the harder it becomes to realize it. Mysterious virtue returns with all things to the source. This is Buddha nature, which is always already present but obscured by cleverness. The return is not an achievement but a recognition. Internal martial arts. The student who collects techniques becomes like the clever population, difficult to teach, always seeking the next trick. Too much cleverness. The martial artist who relies on strategy and cunning is actually limited. Strategies can be countered, tricks can be anticipated. Mysterious virtue is deep and far-reaching. This is the internal power that develops through years of simple practice. Standing, breathing, basic movements repeated until they become natural. This virtue cannot be countered because it is not technique but embodiment. Rivers and seas can be kings of all valleys, because they are skilled at taking the lower position. Therefore they can be kings of all valleys. Thus the sage, wishing to be above the people, must speak as if below them. Wishing to be ahead of the people, must place himself behind them. Therefore the sage dwells above. Yet the people do not feel burdened. He stands in front. Yet the people are not harmed. All under heaven delight in pushing him forward, and never grow tired of him. Because he does not contend, no one under heaven can contend against him. Rivers and seas, the great waters that receive all. King of all valleys, ruler through reception. Skilled at lowering, strategic humility. Wishing to be above people, the desire to lead. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Applicable to internal cultivation as well as external governance. Rivers and seas are kings of all valleys in the body. The center is like the sea, receiving and gathering the energies that flow down to it. The practitioner who forces energy upward creates blockage. The practitioner who allows energy to gather in the lower field accumulates genuine power. Wishing to be above, must speak as if below in cultivation. This translates to the relationship between mind and body, intention and energy. The mind that commands the body creates tension. The mind that serves the body creates harmony. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. As describing the enlightened relationship between teacher and student, and the nature of genuine spiritual authority. Rivers and seas can be kings. The master does not elevate himself above students but creates conditions for the teaching to flow naturally. The student gravitates toward the master not through coercion but through natural attraction to depth. Because he does not contend, no one can contend against him. Chan recognizes this as describing the invulnerability of the enlightened mind. Internal martial arts. Revealing the essence of yielding strategy. Rivers and seas become kings by taking the lower position. The practitioner does not meet force with force but becomes the low point toward which the opponent's energy naturally flows. By being below, the practitioner receives and redirects rather than resisting and exhausting. Wishing to be ahead, must place himself behind. This describes the strategy of following rather than leading in combat. The practitioner follows the opponent's movement, yielding to their force, and by following gains the position of true control. Wang Bi, philosophical. Revealing the essential nature of effective leadership and its foundation in yielding. Rivers and seas can be kings of all valleys. Wang Bi would emphasize that this is not mere metaphor but description of actual principle. Water does not choose to be low, it follows its nature. By following its nature, it becomes the gathering point. The sage who follows the Tao's nature similarly becomes the natural center without effort or contention. The sage dwells above, yet the people do not feel burdened. Wang Bi interprets this as the mark of true leadership versus tyranny. All under heaven say my Tao is great. Yet it seems like nothing special. Only because it is great. Does it seem like nothing special? If it seemed special for long, it would have become small indeed. I have 3 treasures, which I hold and preserve. The first is compassion. The second is frugality. The third is not daring to be ahead of all under heaven. With compassion, one can be courageous. With frugality, one can be generous. Not daring to be ahead, one can become the leader of all. Now if one is courageous without compassion, generous without frugality, ahead without being behind, this is death. With compassion, in battle one will win. In defense one will be secure. When heaven wishes to save someone, it protects them with compassion. Tao is great beyond all categories. Seems unlike indefinable greatness. 3 treasures, foundational virtues. Tsa, compassion, maternal loving kindness. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. My Tao seems like nothing special. This is the ordinary mind that is Buddha mind. It seems unremarkable because it is not the extraordinary experiences that seekers pursue, it is simply what is, without elaboration. The 3 treasures, Chan would recognize compassion, Ci, as karuna, the natural response of awakened awareness to suffering. Frugality, Jian, corresponds to simplicity of mind, not accumulating concepts, not elaborating experience. Not daring to be ahead corresponds to the absence of ego striving, the willingness to be last rather than first. Internal martial arts. Establishing the ethical foundation of genuine martial skill. The 3 treasures in martial context. Compassion means training power while being unwilling to cause harm unnecessarily. Frugality means economy of movement, using minimum force for maximum effect. Not daring to be ahead means not initiating conflict, waiting for the opponent to commit before responding. With compassion, one can be courageous. The martial artist who fights from protection rather than aggression has courage untainted by fear or hatred. Wang Bi, philosophical. The Tao exceeds all categories, therefore, it fits none. If it could be categorized, it would already be limited. Its indefinability is precisely its greatness. The 3 treasures, Wang Bi interprets these as the practical applications of the Tao's principle of non-forcing. Compassion is the Tao's manner of relating, frugality is the Tao's manner of using, not being ahead is the Tao's manner of leading. Each treasure produces its apparent opposite. Compassion produces courage, frugality produces generosity, following produces leadership. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Directly applicable to the cultivation of essence, energy, and spirit, the 3 treasures of internal alchemy. Ci, compassion, corresponds to the cultivation of Shen, spirit, the highest treasure, centered in the heart and expressed as loving awareness. Jian, frugality, corresponds to the preservation of Jing, essence, conserving the fundamental vitality rather than dissipating it through excess. Not daring to be ahead corresponds to the cultivation of Qi, vital energy, energy allowing energy to circulate naturally rather than forcing its movement. The skillful warrior does not display prowess. The skillful fighter does not become angry. The skillful conqueror does not engage directly. The skillful leader places himself below others. This is called the virtue of non-contention. This is called using the strength of others. This is called matching heaven, the highest principle of the ancients. Skillful warrior, one who truly excels, does not display prowess, quiet competence. Skillful fighter, mastery in conflict, does not become angry, emotional clarity. Internal martial arts. Every martial tradition eventually teaches what this verse states directly. The skillful warrior does not display prowess, the seasoned fighter trains quietly, appears unremarkable, and demonstrates nothing until necessary. The need to display reveals insecurity. Genuine skill is invisible until activated. This is as true in the boxing gym as in the dojo. The skillful fighter does not become angry. Anger tightens the body, restricts movement, and clouds judgment. Every combat discipline teaches this. The calm fighter sees more, responds faster, wastes less energy. Wang Bi, philosophical. Establishing the relationship between genuine skill and its apparent opposites. The skillful warrior does not display prowess. Wang Bi would emphasize that display reveals lack, not presence. The warrior who must show strength admits doubt about possessing it. True strength is quiet. True skill requires no advertisement. Heshang Gong, cultivation. The skillful fighter does not become angry. Heshang Gong applies this to the practitioner's relationship with difficulty in practice. When obstacles arise, anger is wasted energy. Calm persistence succeeds where emotional reaction fails. The skillful conqueror does not engage directly when blockages or imbalances appear. The skilled practitioner does not attack them directly but creates conditions for their natural resolution. This is called matching heaven. The cultivator who operates by these principles aligns with the natural order of healing and transformation. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. As describing the enlightened approach to spiritual practice and teaching. The skillful warrior does not display prowess. The Chan master does not demonstrate attainment because there is nothing to demonstrate. Enlightenment is not an acquisition to be shown but a recognition that was always present. The skillful fighter does not become angry. The awakened response to difficulty is equanimity, not reaction. Anger requires a self that is threatened. Without attachment to self, there is no fuel for anger. Among those who use weapons, there is a saying, "I dare not act as the host but remain the guest. I dare not advance an inch but retreat a foot." This is called marching without marching, raising arms without arms, grasping weapons without weapons, engaging where there is no enemy. There is no greater disaster than underestimating the enemy. Underestimating the enemy nearly destroys my treasures. Therefore, when opposing armies meet in battle, the one who grieves will prevail. Those who use weapons say, military wisdom. Act as host, the aggressive initiator. Be the guest, the responsive defender. Advance an inch, costly extension. Wang Bi, philosophical. Revealing the strategic superiority of the defensive posture and the moral foundation of genuine victory. I dare not be the host but the guest. Wang Bi would emphasize that this is not mere strategy but alignment with the Tao's nature. The Tao does not initiate but responds, it does not force but yields, it does not advance but receives. The warrior who acts as guest operates according to natural principle. Marching without marching, Wang Bi interprets this as the formlessness that cannot be countered. What has no form cannot be predicted, what cannot be predicted cannot be prepared against. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Applicable to the internal battle against imbalance and obstruction. I dare not be the host but the guest in cultivation. This means not attacking problems directly but allowing them to reveal themselves while maintaining receptive awareness. The practitioner who forces confrontation with blockages creates tension. The practitioner who waits receives insight. Marching without marching, the cultivator moves through practice without fixed agenda, allowing the session to unfold according to what emerges. Raising arms without arms, intention operates without physical tension. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. As describing the enlightened approach to practice and the internal struggle with delusion. I dare not be the host but the guest. The practitioner does not attack thoughts but observes them as a guest observes the host's activities. Direct attack on delusion strengthens it. Patient observation allows it to exhaust itself. Marching without marching, raising arms without arms, this is practice without fixed form, meditation without technique, engagement without method. Chan practice is precisely this, intensely engaged yet without graspable form. Internal martial arts. This verse is central to internal martial arts strategy, establishing the principles of defensive positioning and emotional foundation. I dare not be the host but the guest. The internal artist does not initiate but waits, not out of fear but from strategic wisdom. The one who initiates commits, the one who responds adapts. The guest has the advantage of seeing what the host will do. Retreat a foot rather than advance an inch, yielding creates space, advancing closes options. By retreating, the internal artist draws the opponent into overextension while maintaining one's own structure. My words are very easy to understand, very easy to practice. Yet no one under heaven can understand them. No one can practice them. Words have an ancestor. Affairs have a master. Only because people lack this understanding. They do not understand me. Those who understand me are rare. Therefore I am precious. Therefore the sage wears coarse cloth, while holding jade within. Very easy to understand, radical simplicity. Very easy to practice, directly applicable. No one can understand the paradox of simplicity. No one can practice unrealized knowledge. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Applicable to the practitioner's relationship with the teaching and the world. My words are easy to understand, easy to practice in cultivation. The instructions are simple. Relax, breathe, be present. Nothing could be more straightforward. Yet practitioners struggle endlessly because they expect complexity, seek dramatic experiences, and miss the ordinary miracle of simple presence. Words have an ancestor, affairs have a master. Heshang Gong would apply this to cultivation. All techniques point back to the same source, all practices serve the same master principle. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. As Laozi's anticipation of Zen's characteristic problem, pointing directly at the moon while everyone examines the finger. My words are easy to understand. Enlightenment is not far away, not at the end of long practice, not hidden behind complex teaching. It is immediately present, plainly obvious, and precisely for this reason, consistently missed. Only because people lack this understanding, Chan would recognize this as describing the barrier of conceptual mind. People understand concepts about enlightenment while missing enlightenment itself, which is prior to concepts. Internal martial arts. Words have an ancestor. All techniques derive from the same principles. The martial artist who grasps the principle can generate endless technique, while the one who collects techniques without principle remains limited. Those who understand me are rare. Genuine internal skill is uncommon precisely because it requires accepting simplicity rather than seeking complexity. The sage wears coarse cloth while holding jade within. The true master appears unremarkable, demonstrates nothing unnecessary, yet possesses capability that the observer cannot assess by watching. Wang Bi, philosophical. My words are easy to understand. Wang Bi would emphasize that this is not false modesty but accurate description. The Tao Te Ching's teaching is not complex, it points simply to what is. The difficulty lies not in the teaching but in the receiver, whose accumulated assumptions prevent recognition of the obvious. Words have an ancestor. Wang Bi interprets this as reference to the Tao itself, the wordless reality that generates all expression. Those who hear only words miss the ancestor, they acquire phrases but not understanding. To know yet think you do not know. This is the highest. To not know yet think you know. This is a disease. Only by recognizing this disease as disease can you be free from disease. The sage is free from disease because he recognizes disease as disease. Therefore he is not diseased. Knowing not knowing, highest wisdom, is highest, supreme excellence. Not knowing yet thinking you know, delusion, being, disease, fundamental affliction. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. To not know yet think you know is disease. Chan recognizes this as the fundamental ignorance, attachment to views, belief in the reality of conceptual constructs. Recognizing disease as disease, this is the function of practice, seeing through delusion in the moment it arises. The medicine is not a new belief but the clear seeing that dissolves all fixed beliefs. The sage is not diseased. The awakened being has no special knowledge but has released the disease of claiming knowledge. Internal martial arts. To know yet think you do not know. The master who has deep skill but remains humble continues to discover. The practitioner who believes mastery is complete has begun to decline. In martial arts, there is always more subtlety to uncover. Whoever thinks they understand fully has stopped learning. Consider the martial artist who wins a few tournaments and decides his training is essentially complete. This is the disease in its most visible form, the confidence of partial success hardening into the certainty that no further depth exists. Wang Bi, philosophical. This epistemological humility connects directly to the opening verse of the entire text. The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. If the ultimate reality exceeds all conceptual framing, then the highest knowledge must always include awareness of what remains beyond the reach of words and categories. To not know yet think you know is disease. Wang Bi interprets this as the fundamental obstacle to wisdom. The mind that believes itself complete has closed the door to learning. The mind that recognizes its incompleteness remains open to the Tao's teaching. Heshang Gong, cultivation. The practitioner must first see clearly the obstacles in body and mind before they can be addressed. Self-deception is the obstacle that prevents seeing all other obstacles. The sage is not diseased. The accomplished practitioner maintains beginner's mind throughout all stages, never believing practice is complete, never resting on attainment. The tradition warns explicitly of Zhu Hua Yu Mo, going astray in practice through pride, where the cultivator's own spiritual confidence becomes the very force that derails progress. When the people do not fear authority, then great authority arrives. Do not intrude upon their dwellings. Do not oppress their livelihood. Only by not oppressing them will they not grow weary of you. Therefore the sage knows himself, but does not display himself. He cherishes himself, but does not exalt himself. Thus he lets go of that and takes this. Not fearing authority, the limit of oppression. Great authority arrives, inevitable reckoning. Do not intrude, respecting boundaries. Their dwellings, private space. Internal martial arts. Real authority comes from genuine skill that does not need fear to establish itself. Do not intrude upon their dwellings. In teaching, the master does not invade students' natural development, does not force premature advancement. Do not oppress their livelihood. Training should build rather than deplete. The sage knows himself but does not display himself. The true master knows his skill deeply but does not demonstrate unnecessarily. Demonstration wastes what silence preserves. Letting go of that, taking this, releasing concern for reputation, retaining focus on actual skill development. Wang Bi, philosophical. When people do not fear authority, great authority arrives. Wang Bi would interpret this as the natural consequence of exceeded limits. Oppression can only proceed so far before resistance arises. The very effort to instill fear eventually produces the destruction of what fear was meant to protect. The sage knows himself but does not display himself. Wang Bi sees this as the sage's alternative to the tyrant's approach. The sage's authority comes not from display but from substance, not from external show but from internal alignment with the Tao. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Do not oppress their livelihood, do not deplete the body's resources through excessive effort. The sage knows himself but does not display himself. Heshang Gong applies this to inner cultivation. The practitioner develops genuine attainment but does not seek to demonstrate it. Display dissipates what silence preserves. The specific practice Heshang Gong prescribes here is inner observation, Nei Guan, turning awareness inward to know the condition of one's own organs, breath, and vital energy rather than projecting outward through demonstration or display. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. As describing the nature of genuine spiritual authority and its contrast with false teaching. When people do not fear authority, great authority arrives. The teacher who relies on external authority, on position or lineage, will eventually lose the student's genuine respect. The authority of awakening, which needs no support, will emerge as all false authorities collapse. The sage knows himself but does not display himself. The realized master has seen through the self and therefore has nothing to display. What could be shown? Enlightenment is not an acquisition to be exhibited. Courage to dare brings death. Courage to not dare brings life. Of these two, one benefits, one harms. Who knows why heaven hates what it hates? Even the sage finds this difficult. The way of heaven. It does not contend yet excels at overcoming. It does not speak yet excels at responding. It does not summon yet things come of themselves. It is unhurried yet excels at planning. Heaven's net is vast, vast. Its mesh is wide, yet nothing slips through. Courage to dare, bold action. Courage to not dare, restrained strength. Sho. Death, the consequence of rash daring. Huo. Life, the fruit of restraint. Wang Bi, philosophical. Revealing the inscrutability of the Tao's operations and the necessity of humility before cosmic order. Who knows why heaven hates what it hates? Wang Bi would emphasize that even the sage cannot fully comprehend the Tao's movements. This is not ignorance but appropriate recognition of limits. The Tao's justice operates by principles that exceed human understanding. Heaven's net is vast, its mesh is wide, yet nothing slips through. Wang Bi interprets this as the ultimate statement of cosmic justice. The Tao does not enforce through tight control but through the inherent nature of reality. Heshang Gong, cultivation. The practitioner must have courage, but the courage to wait, to allow, to not force. Heaven's net is vast, yet nothing slips through. Heshang Gong applies this to the body's wisdom. No imbalance goes unrecorded, no excess avoids consequence. The practitioner cannot deceive the body-mind system. Every choice accumulates, every action produces result. Does not speak yet responds. The body responds to practice without words, without explanation. Does not summon yet things come. When conditions are correct, the energies gather naturally without forced summoning. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. As describing the inescapable nature of karma and the impossibility of evading reality. Heaven's net is vast, its mesh is wide, yet nothing slips through. Chan recognizes this as the teaching that all actions have consequences, not as external punishment but as the inherent nature of reality. The enlightened response is not to fear consequences but to act from clarity so that consequences align with awakening. Does not contend yet overcomes, does not speak yet responds. This is Buddha nature operating, without effort, without declaration, yet perfectly responsive to all circumstances. Internal martial arts. Does not speak yet responds. The skilled martial artist reads the opponent without verbal exchange, responds to intention before it manifests as action. Heaven's net is vast, yet nothing slips through in combat. The truly skilled practitioner creates an unavoidable situation. The net seems open, escape seems possible, yet somehow every avenue leads to defeat. This is martial mastery at its highest. The opponent defeats himself within conditions that cannot be evaded. If the people do not fear death, how can you threaten them with death? If you could make the people constantly fear death, and those who act strangely, you could seize and execute. Who would dare? There is always the great executioner who kills. To kill in place of the great executioner. This is called cutting wood in place of the master carpenter. Those who cut wood in place of the master carpenter rarely avoid injuring their own hands. Not fearing death, beyond the reach of threats. Threaten with death, the tool that fails. Constantly fearing death, valuing life. Those who act strangely, social deviance. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Pain that should deter is ignored because overall vitality is depleted. There is always an executioner. Heshang Gong identifies this with the body's natural processes of correction. When practice is incorrect, consequences follow automatically. When imbalance persists, deterioration arrives. Cutting in place of the master carpenter, the practitioner who forces correction, who tries to manually adjust what the body should regulate naturally, risks greater injury. The body has its own master carpenter, its innate intelligence, and crude intervention produces self-harm. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. The practitioner who tries to force enlightenment, who attempts to manipulate spiritual development through sheer will, injures himself. Rarely avoid injuring their own hands. The attempt to do Buddha's work from ego produces only deeper entanglement. Let awakening happen as it happens. Crude interference delays rather than advances. The master carpenter is Buddha nature. Let it do its work. This is the essence of the koan. Does a dog have Buddha nature? The student who tries to solve it by intellectual force cuts his own hands on the master carpenter's blade. Internal martial arts. Establishing the principle of minimal intervention and the danger of exceeding one's proper role. If people do not fear death, the opponent who has nothing to lose is the most dangerous. Threats are useless against desperation. The skilled martial artist avoids creating desperate opponents. There is always an executioner in combat. Natural consequence operates. Poor structure produces its own defeat. Improper force returns upon itself. The internal artist need not defeat the opponent's own errors do the work. Wang Bi, philosophical. Revealing the proper limits of human governance and the cosmic order that supersedes it. If the people do not fear death, Wang Bi would emphasize that this indicates a failure of governance so severe that existence has become unendurable. The threat of death only works when life is worth preserving. When governance has made life unbearable, its only tool has lost its power. There is always an executioner. Wang Bi interprets the executioner as the Tao's natural operation, the inherent consequence of actions. The ruler who thinks he must execute justice misunderstands his role. The people starve. Because those above devour too much in taxes. Therefore they starve. The people are difficult to govern. Because their rulers act with too much interference. Therefore they are difficult to govern. The people take death lightly. Because their rulers pursue life too intensely. Therefore they take death lightly. Only those who do not make too much of living are wiser than those who prize life highly. The people's hunger, caused by rulers. Consuming too much in taxes, exploitative governance. Difficult to govern, result of interference. Acting, Interfering, activist governance. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. Because rulers interfere too much, the mind that constantly intervenes in its own process creates the unrest it tries to calm. Because rulers pursue life too intensely, this is fundamental attachment, the root of suffering. Clinging to existence creates the conditions that make existence unbearable. Those who do not make too much of living, Chan recognizes this as describing the enlightened relationship to existence, present without grasping, living without making a project of living. The awakened being holds life lightly not because life has no value but because grasping destroys value. Internal martial arts. Establishing the principle of minimal force and the danger of excess effort. The people starve because rulers consume too much in the body, the muscles starve when the mind demands excessive tension. Energy consumed in unnecessary contraction is unavailable for genuine work. Because rulers interfere too much, the body becomes uncoordinated when the conscious mind constantly intervenes in movements that should be reflexive. Because rulers pursue life too intensely, the martial artist who fights desperately to survive creates the very tension that ensures defeat. Wang Bi, philosophical. The system has finite resources, the ruler's surplus is the people's lack. Because rulers act with too much interference, Wang Bi interprets Yu Wei, being, as the fundamental error, the attempt to actively manage what should be left alone. Every intervention creates reaction, every control measure generates what it was meant to prevent. Those who do not make too much of living, Wang Bi sees this as the essence of Taoist wisdom, holding life appropriately rather than desperately. The sage does not neglect life but does not inflate its importance. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Directly applicable to the practitioner's relationship with body and vitality. The people starve because those above devour too much in cultivation, the body's systems starve when the mind's demands consume too much energy. Excessive mental activity depletes what should nourish the organs. Because rulers act with too much interference, the body becomes difficult to regulate when the mind constantly interferes with natural process. Because rulers pursue life too intensely, Heshang Gong applies this to cultivation obsession. When people are born, they are soft and weak. When they die, they are hard and stiff. When plants are born, they are soft and tender. When they die, they are withered and dry. Therefore the hard and stiff are companions of death. The soft and weak are companions of life. Thus a weapon that is strong will not prevail. A tree that is stiff will be broken. The strong and great take the lower position. The soft and weak take the higher position. Soft and weak, qualities of life. Hard and strong, qualities of death. Soft and tender, living plants. Withered and dry, dead plants. Internal martial arts. Force meets emptiness, strength finds nothing to grip. The rigid arm is easier to lock, the tense body is easier to throw. The strong and great take the lower position in grappling, in striking, in every exchange. The stiff fighter is beneath the soft one. The opponent's rigidity becomes the handle by which they are controlled. The soft and weak take the higher position, the practitioner who maintains softness controls the exchange. This is not abstract philosophy but concrete physical reality discoverable on any mat, in any ring, in any honest practice. Wang Bi, philosophical. Life itself is characterized by adaptability, responsiveness, change. Death is characterized by fixity, unresponsiveness, stasis. The sage aligns with life by maintaining softness. The strong and great take the lower position. Wang Bi interprets this as the cosmic order revealing itself. What appears powerful is actually vulnerable precisely because of its rigidity. What appears weak possesses the qualities that ensure survival and ultimate dominance. The verse is not telling us what we should value but showing us how reality actually operates and inviting us to align with that reality. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Directly applicable to internal cultivation. When people are born, they are soft and weak. The infant's body is the model for the cultivated body. Heshang Gong would prescribe practices that return the body to infant-like suppleness, stretching, breathing, releasing tension, softening tissues. When they die, they are hard and stiff. The progressive stiffening of age is the march toward death. Cultivation reverses this march. A weapon that is strong will not prevail in cultivation. Forcing produces resistance. Gentleness produces transformation. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. As describing the nature of enlightened mind versus deluded mind. The soft and weak are companions of life. The awakened mind is characterized by flexibility, openness, responsiveness. It does not harden into fixed positions, it flows with circumstances. The hard and stiff are companions of death. The deluded mind hardens into views, opinions, attachments. This rigidity is spiritual death even while the body lives. A tree that is stiff will be broken. Chan recognizes this as describing the fate of fixed views. The mind that cannot bend will be shattered by reality's changes. The way of heaven. Is it not like the bending of a bow? What is high is pressed down. What is low is raised up. What has excess is diminished. What is deficient is supplemented. The way of heaven diminishes excess and supplements deficiency. The way of humans is not like this. It diminishes the deficient to serve the excessive. Who can offer their excess to serve all under heaven? Only those who possess the Tao. Therefore the sage acts but does not rely on his actions. He achieves but does not dwell in his achievement. He has no desire to display his worthiness. Bending a bow, cosmic equilibrium image. High is pressed down, natural leveling. Low is raised up, natural supplementing. Diminish excess, heaven's economy. Wang Bi, philosophical. Revealing a fundamental difference between natural law and human custom. The way of heaven is like bending a bow. Wang Bi would emphasize that this is not mere metaphor but accurate description. The cosmos operates by equilibrium. Excess naturally flows toward deficiency, high and low naturally balance. This is not justice imposed but physics operating. The way of humans diminishes the deficient to serve the excessive. Wang Bi sees this as the corruption introduced by human civilization's departure from natural order. Human structures, economic, political, social, reverse cosmic flow. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Over time, this simple leveling accomplishes what no forceful technique can. The body's own economy, like heaven's bow, naturally presses down what is too high and raises what is too low. The sage acts but does not rely on his actions in cultivation. This means practicing without attachment to result. The practitioner who grasps at attainment creates the imbalance of excess. The practitioner who practices and releases maintains heaven's balance. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. The way of humans diminishes the deficient to serve the excessive. This describes samsaric existence, where ego accumulates at the expense of others, creating the karma that must eventually balance. Only those who possess the Tao, the awakened being, operates outside this economy. Having no excess to protect and no deficiency to fear, the enlightened mind naturally gives and receives in perfect balance. He has no desire to display his worthiness. The awakened being has nothing to prove, nothing to accumulate, nothing to defend. This is freedom from karma's wheel. Internal martial arts. Describing the principle of structural balance and the strategy of equilibrium. What is high is pressed down, what is low is raised up. In proper structure, the body's weight is not accumulated in the upper body, high, but sinks to the lower, low. The bow image describes exactly the stored power of correct martial stance, upper and lower balanced, not collapsed into either extreme. What has excess is diminished. The martial artist who uses excessive force depletes himself. The opponent's excess becomes his vulnerability. Nothing under heaven is softer and weaker than water. Yet for attacking the hard and strong, nothing can surpass it. There is nothing that can take its place. The weak overcomes the strong. The soft overcomes the hard. Everyone under heaven knows this. Yet no one can practice it. Therefore the sage says, one who accepts the filth of the nation is called the lord of the soil and grain. One who accepts the misfortune of the nation is called the king of all under heaven. True words seem like their opposite. Nothing softer than water, ultimate softness. Attacking the hard and strong, water's power. Nothing can surpass it, invincible through yielding. Cannot be replaced, unique quality. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Everyone knows this, yet no one can practice it. Heshang Gong recognizes this as the cultivation challenge. Knowing that softness works better than force, practitioners still tense and push. The mind's habits override the body's wisdom. One who accepts the filth of the nation in cultivation, this means accepting the body's impurities without rejection, working with what is rather than demanding what should be. The practitioner who receives all conditions with equanimity becomes master of them. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. Therefore it cannot be defeated, there is nothing to attack. Everyone knows this, yet no one can practice it. Chan recognizes this as describing the gap between understanding and realization. Conceptual knowledge of non-attachment does not produce actual non-attachment, only direct seeing releases the grip. One who accepts the filth of the nation, the bodhisattva accepts suffering rather than avoiding it, takes on rather than deflecting. This acceptance is not weakness but the position from which genuine help becomes possible. Internal martial arts. The Tai Chi Chuan practitioner whose yielding hands redirect incoming force. The grappler who flows like water around resistance. The striker whose relaxed hands hit harder than tense fists ever could. Everyone knows this, yet no one can practice it. The martial challenge is exactly this. Knowing that softness works, practitioners still stiffen. Fear produces tension, tension produces vulnerability. Every coach has said it, every fighter has struggled with it. Wang Bi, philosophical. Everyone knows this, yet no one can practice it. Wang Bi sees this as the great failure of human understanding. Intellectual knowledge does not translate into behavior because behavioral change requires releasing what feels powerful. People prefer the feeling of strength even when it produces defeat. True words seem like their opposite. Wang Bi interprets this as warning that the Tao's teaching will always appear inverted to conventional understanding. What seems like prescription for weakness is actually revelation of genuine power. When settling great grievances, some resentment always remains. How can this be considered good? Therefore the sage holds the left tally, but does not demand payment from others. Those with virtue keep the tally. Those without virtue demand the debt. Heaven's way has no favorites, yet it always sides with the good. Settling great grievances, forced resolution. Remaining resentment, residue of conflict. How can this be good? Questioning force. Hold the left tally, retaining the claim. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. The sage holds the left tally but does not demand payment. The awakened being releases all claims, all grievances, all debts. What is owed is not collected because collection perpetuates the cycle. This is the perfection of giving described in the Diamond Sutra. The Bodhisattva gives without any notion of a giver, a receiver, or a gift, and this giving without a tally is the only giving that does not plant seeds of future grievance. Heaven has no favorites yet sides with the good. Chan recognizes this as karma operating. The cosmos favors awakening not through partiality but through nature. Internal martial arts. The sage holds the left tally but does not demand payment. The martial master who could extract revenge, who has earned the right to humiliate the opponent, releases that claim. This is not weakness but superior strategy. Enemies created persist, enemies released disperse. Those with virtue manage agreements, the internal artist seeks harmony, not dominance, relationship, not victory. Those without virtue manage collections, the external fighter focuses on winning, on proving, on extracting acknowledgement. Heaven sides with the good, the cosmos supports what does not oppose it. Wang Bi, philosophical. The sage holds the left tally but does not demand payment. Wang Bi interprets this as the sage's relationship to all that is owed him. He has the right to demand, he does not exercise it. This is not weakness but alignment with heaven's way, which operates through natural consequence rather than forced collection. Heaven has no favorites yet sides with the good. Wang Bi sees this as the ultimate statement of cosmic justice, not imposed but inherent, not partial yet consistent. The good are supported not by special favor but by the natural operation of the Tao. Heshang Gong, cultivation. The body owes health and harmony. The practitioner does not extract these through force but creates conditions for natural recovery. Those with virtue manage agreements, the skilled practitioner works with the body's nature, honoring its rhythms. Those without virtue manage collections, the unskilled practitioner tries to force results, extracting performance the body cannot sustainably give. Heaven sides with the good, natural law supports correct practice, the body responds to what aligns with its nature. A small country with few people. Let there be tools tenfold and hundredfold. Yet let them not be used. Let the people take death gravely, and not travel far. Though there are boats and carriages, let there be no occasion to ride them. Though there are armor and weapons, let there be no occasion to display them. Let the people return to knotting cords, and using them. Let them find their food sweet, their clothes beautiful, their homes secure, their customs joyful. Neighboring countries may be within sight, the sounds of chickens and dogs heard between them. Yet the people grow old and die, without ever visiting one another. Small country, few people, ideal scale. Tenfold tools, technology unused. Value death, taking life seriously. Not traveling far, sufficiency in place. Internal martial arts. The people grow old and die without visiting one another. Genuine practitioners do not need to constantly verify their skills against others. Each practice is complete, there is no need to visit other schools to prove or to learn. The art has reached sufficiency, searching has ended. Let them find their customs joyful, the internal practice becomes its own reward, complete without competition or comparison. The old master in the park at dawn, moving through the form he has practiced for 40 years, finds his food sweet and his customs joyful. Wang Bi, philosophical. Presenting the ideal of governance that has succeeded so completely it has become invisible. A small country with few people, Wang Bi would emphasize that this is not prescription for territorial policy but image of successful rule. When governance aligns with the Tao, the state effectively becomes small, not in territory but in need for apparatus. Let there be tools but not use them. Wang Bi interprets this as sufficiency, eliminating the drive for expansion and exploitation. The tools of power exist, the conditions that would require their use do not. Heshang Gong, cultivation. Describing the state of the cultivated body-mind. A small country with few people in cultivation, this is the simplified inner life where complexity has been reduced to essentials. Tools tenfold but not used, the practitioner has capacities that remain in reserve, not every ability must be exercised. Let them find their food sweet, their clothes beautiful. Heshang Gong applies this to the practitioner's contentment with simple practice. The ordinary becomes sufficient, the exotic is unnecessary. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. As describing the enlightened state and the community of the awakened. A small country with few people, this is the Sangha at its purest. Small, intimate, sufficient unto itself. Tools exist but are not used, capacities for complexity remain but are unnecessary when simplicity suffices. Let them return to knotting chords. Chan recognizes this as the return to basics that characterizes genuine practice. Strip away elaboration, return to essential pointing. The people grow old and die without visiting one another. Chan interprets this as describing minds that have ceased seeking. True words are not beautiful. Beautiful words are not true. The good do not argue. Those who argue are not good. The wise are not widely learned. The widely learned are not wise. The sage does not hoard. The more he does for others, the more he has. The more he gives to others, the greater his abundance. The way of heaven benefits and does not harm. The way of the sage acts and does not contend. True words, genuine speech. Not beautiful, plain truth. The good, virtuous ones. Do not argue, secure virtue. Wang Bi, philosophical. True words are not beautiful. Wang Bi would emphasize that the Tao's teaching itself exemplifies this. Plain, direct, without literary ornamentation. The Tao Te Ching does not persuade through beauty but through truth. The sage does not hoard. Wang Bi sees this as the culmination of non-action. The sage gives away even the impulse to accumulate. What remains after all hoarding ceases is inexhaustible. The way of heaven benefits and does not harm. Wang Bi interprets this as a fundamental nature of the Tao, entirely constructive, never destructive. Heshang Gong, cultivation. The breath does not need to be beautiful, only true. The body does not need to argue its health into existence, only to be good. The mind does not need broad accumulation of techniques, only the depth of one practice, fully realized. This is the final cultivation, the return to what was always already present, the unadorned breath entering and leaving the body without interference. Bodhidharma Chan, Zen. The good do not argue. The awakened being has nothing to prove, nothing to defend. Debate belongs to conceptual mind, realization lies beyond it. The sage does not hoard. Attachment to spiritual attainment is the final hoarding to release. The more he gives, the more he has. The emptiness that gives away all possessions is fullness itself. Acts and does not contend. This final teaching describes the Bodhisattva path, fully engaged in helping all beings yet without the struggle that would perpetuate suffering. The sage acts from emptiness, and emptiness produces no contention. Internal martial arts. The sage does not hoard. The teacher who gives away all knowledge finds that knowledge increases rather than depletes. Acts and does not contend. This is the final expression of internal martial art, full engagement in combat without the oppositional stance that creates vulnerability. The internal artist acts, responds, flows, but does not struggle, does not resist, does not compete. This is the art completed, effective without effort, victorious without contention. Discovering the Deeper Aspects of the Tao, by Ryan Franklin. Both volumes are available on Amazon and free on Kindle Unlimited. Links in the description. If you haven't seen it, Volume 1, Tao, covers chapters 1 through 37, where Lao Tzu reveals the nameless source of all things.